So now we got the technology on. We have our every guest. So we are good to go live on air. That's the best thing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome you all to India HR Live. So you all know this month we are discussing employee engagement as a topic. And last week, that was a fantastic show that we had. Amazing guests joined us from India and had an insightful session on why employee engagement fails. But now this session, we really want to take it global because when we talk about employee engagement, we know culture and demographies is all matter. So let's get right to it and let's meet our guest. We have DP. Dilpreet Singh, he's the Vice President and Head HR for IBM India and South Asia. DP, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Nisha. It's a pleasure being on the show and with all the panelists. I look forward to not only contributing, but also learning from the experience of everyone on the show. So thank you. Just a quick background. I have been in the area of business and HR now for over 34 years. And this is a topic which I really love. So thank you for the invite. And it's a pleasure and look forward to participating with each one of you.
Right. So we know IBM has done some fantastic studies on employee engagement. So we look forward to hearing that perspective from you.
Thank you.
And we have Dr. Pallab. So we know last show we have scheduled this show with Dr. Pallab, and due to some reasons, due to technical glitches, we couldn't have his insights on. But now we have Dr. Pallab on. Dr. Pallab, welcome to the show.
Thank you. As I said, I'm delighted to be here for this discussion. And regarding my background, as I say, 30 years in HR. I have been the head of HR. My last job was, I was the country head HR for Citrix. Before that with Dell. Before that with Cambridge Technology. And before that some of other companies. 20 years in IT and 10 years in non-IT. And I have about 6 months of consulting experience. And currently I am consulting in the area of leadership change. That's my primary area. And I also am a researcher. I'm a PhD guide, and I research in the areas of human resources and organizational behavior. So that's in a nutshell, and I'm look forward to a stimulating discussion. So at least, other than Nisha and his team and all the other panelists, I also stay engaged.
Great. So welcome to the show again, and please meet Kevin Grossman. I know Kevin through T-Chat, which is the #1 Twitter chat available for HR and leadership professionals online. So that's how I got interacted with Kevin, and then we got the opportunity to meet personally at SHRM annual conference last year. And we are so excited to have Kevin on our show. Well, Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Nisha. And this is exciting because we've got so many different time zones. We're all time travelers today. Right, Linda? Time travelers. There you go. So thank you so much for having me on. I've been in the HR recruiting technology space for, gosh, over 15 years now. And while I always joke and say that I've only played HR on TV, I've done a lot of the things that HR practitioners do as it relates to recruiting and onboarding and hiring and training and developing, and whether it be a team, a staff, or myself. And I've always had a special affinity to the practitioner side, although I've never been one. But I love the space. I've been in it a long time, and currently work for PeopleFluent, which is a HR software company, talent management software. And like you mentioned, I do the Talent Culture T-Chat show every Wednesday with Megan and Biro, which is really a lot of fun. We've been doing that for 4 years too. So in that show alone, and a lot of my own writing, I've talked a lot about employee engagement in different capacities. So I'm excited today to learn from everybody on the panel as well. Besides, maybe sharing hopefully a little words of wisdom here and there. Maybe we'll see. But thanks for having me.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. And then next we have Kimberly Patterson. Well, I mean, as soon as I started blogging, I started following all the blogs that I know on social media. And Kim's blog, Unconventional HR, that was one of my favorite blogs out there. And then I got interacted with her through a multi-contributor blog that is Women of HR, and she's always been there as a mentor for me. So I'm so lucky to have her on this show. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nisha. It was great meeting you, and we did have some good conversations when we met on the phone, so thanks for that. I've been an HR generalist, basically covering every area under the HR umbrella for 25 years, hands-on. I roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty. I don't like sitting in an office and delegating too much. Primarily, I've worked for small companies, which I like the best, and the last 2.5 years I've been on my own doing consulting, which has been incredibly liberating because it's a whole different environment and basically allowed me to rejuvenate my, I don't want to say passion because it's not passion, but rejuvenate my like of the profession. I'll say like, because HR, it can be difficult. And so it's not, if I could do it over again, I might do marketing. But, after all these years, I'm good at it and I do enjoy it.
Wonderful. Well, we are glad to hear that. And
you're supposed to say I heart HR.
I know. I got to tell you though, but that's why I'm unconventional HR.
I know.
The profession cannot be pleasant sometimes, and our peers can be unpleasant at times.
Neither, and by the way, marketing's the same way, but we can talk about that another day. So.
I bet.
Interesting. Yeah, stay tuned. And interesting session is going to unfold right now.
Oh, yeah.
So we met all the guests from India and from United States, now to the other part of the world, from Australia. We have Linda Jones, Director of Marketing, Small Improvements. So personally, for me, this is me interacting with Linda virtually for the first time. So I'm so happy and honored to have you here on the show. Linda, welcome to India Live Show.
Thank you very much. It's awesome to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. I'm actually in Berlin at the moment. So greetings from the World Cup champions of the World Soccer Cup. There's been a great party today in Berlin, so I heard. And yes, today everyone in Germany is very unproductive but very engaged, for sure. So my background is a little bit different. I was a graphic designer most of my life and really wanted to get more involved with people. My happiest moments were always interacting with the clients and really understanding what it is that they want. And some 3 years ago, I had that opportunity to be involved with Small Improvements, a little performance management software, a little startup, not a little software, but a performance management software to basically help employees communicate better, give praise, kudos, objectives, and make performance management easier. So for the last 3 years, I've been extremely fortunate to travel around the world and meet our exceptional clients and help companies communicate better and have more engaged employees. So likewise, I'm very intrigued about this chat today and very keen to hear and share and learn from others.
Great. So we met all of our guests, and as by now you might have already understood that we have a fantastic panelists lined up right now with different perspectives across the globe. So when we talk about employee engagement, as I said in the beginning, generational differences and demographical differences all matter because character, culture, it's all what we as a person, right? So when we talk about what employees values the most, it can differ from one employee to the other and from one culture to the other as well. And that's how we need guests from different parts of the world to find out how that culture and how that value is different from person to person or from country to country, and how that impacts an employee at an organization, very particularly how that impacts an employee engagement very particularly. So let's get right to it. So by now, DP, what do you think are some of the drivers of employees in order to become engaged in the workplace when we talk from an India perspective?
So, Nisha, let me first share with you that employee engagement is actually an outcome, right? So, it's
Correct.
an outcome of, as we have measured in IBM and Connexa, of four critical parameters. It's about pride, satisfaction on the job, it's about advocacy, and it's about commitment. Now, behind these four elements is what we call are the drivers. And these drivers really vary from an organization to organization. It will vary possibly from country to country, and within that comes the culture part. So as I look at it, it is various aspects are there. But if I was to really talk about the India dimension onto this, there are about, what we have measured is approximately about 12 parameters that really come into play. And so I'll talk more about those, but these are slightly different than what you will see somewhere else when it comes down to priority. So I think that is what I would say to start with, that the drivers will vary, but for us, what is most important in the country that we have seen is open communication, right? We look forward to a lot of recognition which is there. We need to really trust our leaders which are there. So we need collaboration and involvement. Whereas ethics and corporate are engaging, but possibly it's lower in the 10 or 11 top pieces which are there. So these are the things which are very, very important drivers within the country as a whole, but this would vary from a company to company and organization to organization. But very important is also what is the outstanding future. So if you look at everything else, the open communication becomes the number one. Creating change, recognition, trust in leaders, these are the leading, I would say, drivers within the country. So let me stop at this and see what next, others have to say on this one.
Right. Yeah. We would like to get some of the insights from Dr. Pallab as well, because he's also has this global exposure working in different parts of the world and managing workforce from different parts of the world. So, but basically from an Indian perspective, what do you see are some of the drivers that Indian employees value most?
Thank you, DP, for giving the perspective. And I will again go back to the basics. As when we measure employee engagement, what are we measuring? The fact of the life is, if you look at from the research perspective, employee engagement has looked as a set of behaviors. Employee engagement has been looked as a state. And employment engagement in some of the areas have also been looked as traits. So I think in an organization across the globe, I've seen all these things being kind of manifested as employee engagement. That's one. So I will go by what DP said, that what's the outcome of employee engagement. I always say that the reason I believe organizations are interested in employee engagement, because research has clearly shown that employee engagement is directly related to what I call it as the bottom line of the organization. Let's get that very clear, top line, bottom line. And that's why, in earlier days, we used to look at job satisfaction. But job satisfaction is not being taught much because organizations soon realize, after close to about 350 studies, that job satisfaction does not guarantee the top line and bottom line, whereas employee engagement does. So I want to give this perspective why organizations are getting interested in employee engagement. And I would say in terms of how it gets manifested or what is the outcome, employees are engaged. I'll say that Avon Hewitt talk about the 3S parameters, which is basically say, stay, and strive. Say, the positive, how much positivity when you speak you're about organization. In terms of the, again, another outcome, how long you stay in that organization. And last but not the least, how much you give yourself, strive to achieve results. So if you see these three things, there are some amount of cultural differences. If you look at 2014 survey of Hewitt, which is basically talking about what happened in 2013, but published in 2014, one thing is very clear because you talked about irrespective of culture, irrespective of the location, guess what? Career emerges as #1 driver for employee engagement. So this is very clear. Very interestingly, I have more experience in India and Europe and in North America. I don't have much experience in Latin countries. So I'll just focus on India as respect to North America and APAC. North America, the managing performance has emerged as #2, which was not there in 2012. 2013, has emerged as #2 in terms of the driver for engagement. Whereas, very interestingly, managing performance for Europe and Asia Pacific, and I would say India is under Asia Pacific, has gone down to #5. Whereas, guess what? In APAC, pay has emerged as one of the major drivers after career, right? Whereas organization reputation has emerged as sort of #3 in North America. Europe, it is #2. Pay goes to Europe for #3. And communication, innovation, brand alignment, that's one new construct I see, has emerged as North America and Europe as one of the major drivers. And recognition, interestingly, recognition for India emerges as 4, but in terms of the pegging order in terms of how it make a difference. The only one point I wanted to tell is, Nisha, you talked about millennials, and I'll leave it to that. Very interestingly, the research shows there is more commonalities in terms of what creates employee engagement in spite of what age bracket they are. There are differences. Obviously, millennials make difference, but there are more commonalities, telling that people, even if there are different stages of career, value certain things fundamentally, which helps them to be psychologically connected to the organization. That's what my perspective is.
Yeah, which is very good that you noted that point. Well, in fact, when we talk about employee engagement, and even though multicultural employees are there or multi-generational employees are there, what values the most is, if the organization can provide them with a purpose or a fulfillment, that's what values the most, I would guess. And now that you have shared some of the insights and interesting metrics from the studies on global employee engagement trends. So let's hear from Kevin and Kim from a US perspective. Kevin, I would like you to take the turn and then talk a little bit about what do you see are some of the drivers of employee engagement when we talk about the workforce in the United States very particularly. Because Dr. Pallavi has mentioned some of the interesting insights that we have shared on our blog too. From Avon and throughout global career opportunities being ranked as the first driver, and then followed by organization reputation and managing performance and other factors. So what do you see are some of the insights and interesting journey throughout your experience?
So me?
Yes.
My turn?
Yes,
No.
it's your turn.
No, it was fascinating to listen to the gentleman talk. Excuse me, because it's always great to get a broader global perspective on this thing that we call employee engagement. That I know that organizations and thought leaders and have been talking about this, behavioral economists. I mean, you name it. We've been talking about this for years now. And the kind of the, I guess, the harsh reality in, you know, and I can't speak for obviously the entire United States, but based on my own experience and research that I've read and worked with our own customers at PeopleFluent, for example, there's still quite a disparity, and it's the numbers show it. I mean, just based on last year's numbers alone, I think there are probably going to be some new Gallup numbers coming out soon, and other research organizations, Burson, and many others do engagement all the time. It's pretty dismal still overall. I mean, there's a lot of unfortunately a lot of unhappy people, and I think a couple of different perspectives that I'll throw out there that, again, based on what I know, my own experience, millennials kind of helping to drive some behavioral change that I think have washed over multi-generations now. Mm-hmm. And that is, for example, first and foremost, and I'll speak about more knowledge workers than anything. So this big, broad category of individuals that, whether they work in the office or remotely, they're more salaried employees, not hourly workers per se. But this whole expanse of knowledge workers, they want to do what they want to do when they want to do it from a consumer-driven behavior, right? So we've got our devices. We started bringing them to work years ago. IT said, "Whoa, stop! Don't do that anymore." But we kept doing it. We kept bringing our stuff. We want to consume what we want to consume when we want to do that. And I think what's happened is that with the Great Recession that we're still recovering from globally. Since 2007, 2008, the fact of the matter is that a lot of individuals have kind of taken ownership over their own development, the kinds of work they want to do, whether it be for economic reasons, they've gone to more contingent contract work, or they've gone entrepreneurial. Organizations at the same time are more open to different kinds of work, but to me, it always comes back to the work. It's the work. I'm loyal to the work that I want to do first and foremost. Then I'm loyal to the teams around me that I work with and around, and then I'm loyal to the brand and the leadership. And I think, and I've seen some, research and anecdotal stories around this, but I feel personally, for me, my own experience and what I've seen, that's really kind of where it's at. So you've got two different camps going on. And then, speaking of the pain that Kimberly's probably going to talk about from HR,
Correct.
I just read, there was an article in the Sure magazine, just an online piece I just read early this morning about HR grappling with all this regulatory stuff, right? FMLA and the minimum wage and Affordable Care Act and all these things that are constantly pummeling businesses and organizations in HR, and yet we want to talk about let's be happy and engaged and do work. So there's this grading. There always will be. But I think what's happening though is that the progressive organizations that are getting it understand that if I make it more about the work that individuals are committed to, and if I have a learning culture that's all about developing learners and learners who are going to be the next leaders as well.
Correct.
And engage people with a kind of a one size fits one, not a one size fits all approach from both process as well as software. And I think that is where you're going to see more. You do see, because the evidence shows, discretionary effort, because I'm more emotionally committed to what I like to do, what I want to do, what I want to learn and grow to do, and that drives business outcomes. So the two gentlemen were talking about before I spoke. And so I think, to me, that's exciting. I think there's a lot of a time ahead before we kind of start closing that gap. But I think that's what's happening now, and organizations realize they need to start changing the way. I mean, I haven't even read this book yet, but I just saw Josh Bersin plugged it. Mm-hmm. The Alliance, Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn just wrote this book called The Alliance, and it's about this new working relationship. That I'm excited to read, but some of the things that it touches on are some of my points, and I look forward to reading it, but it's more about a different way of working together around the work, and not about roles and strata and classification, but that we all can be rewarded on. So anyway, those are some of the things that I see, but again, there's still quite a disparity between the truly engaged and the very unhappy. So those are my thoughts.
Well, it's interesting, and it is a challenge to find out, truly engaged or happy or unhappy employees. So there is a direct line or not. Let's find out more about it. And Kim, what do you see, or because you have been working with so many of your clients during the past decade, so what have you seen are some of the drivers that workforce from United States values the most? And I know you have some of the clients in Bangalore and some part of India as well, but still working in a global arena, what do you think are some of the drivers that employees literally values the most?
Well, as was said already, it's impossible to say it's one, two, or three drivers because everyone has their own personal priority. But I do see a huge disparity in the priorities of the company and the employees. When I think about engagement, it's almost triple prong because you have your work, engagement with your work, which I agree, I think is everyone's first priority. You have engagement with others, with your team, because in a lot of companies, not everyone gets along. You put multi-dimensional human beings in an office and say, work together, well, you're going to have issues. And then you have engagement with your clients or your customers if you have them. So you have three complex behaviors that you expect will all result in the company's goal. All of this has to add up and meet the goal of the company. And that's very, very, very difficult to do. What I've seen is that there are never clear parameters from leadership that trickle down. The leaders may tell their managers, and then it stops there. Also, engagement, and if I'm jumping ahead, I apologize, but I think one of the biggest problems that I've seen throughout the years is that engagement can be treated as a warm and fuzzy project from, that HR is trying to do to make everybody happy. And as soon as HR gets through with it, it goes right back on the shelf. When engagement is a verb, it's ongoing, and it's something that managers need to do, employees need to do, leaders need to do. It's not a project that you implement and then it ends. And in fact, my philosophy is we lose the jargon. Don't call it engagement. Mm-hmm. Just make work better for everyone. Encourage better communication. Encourage more feedback and transparency. But again, all of these are gray areas. And I really think it's going to be close to impossible to find any company that has a high level of positive engagement, only because humans are too complex. We can't take every human we work with, put them in a box, and say, do this, because it won't happen. Everyone has to like it. Everyone has to be on board. And I've seen the biggest complaint from employees is that their managers don't support them and they don't explain to them why they're doing what they're doing and why their work is important. And that's one of the biggest drivers, in my opinion, is every single person wants to know that the work they do matters to the company. And how does it matter? Tell me what I sit here and do 8, 9, 10 hours a day, how that impacts the goals of the company, financially or otherwise. And I will tell you, if people start doing that, people will pay attention to their work and also how their teammates and coworkers, how their work impacts their work. And the full understanding is lacking, especially in very, very large companies.
Wonderful. Well, it's really interesting to hear some of your perspective, and you said what's the truth is really, and behind the veil, what is really happening. Not about the jargon, employee engagement, very particularly. So, Linda, you are helping your clients managing the communication and performance improvement as well, and how that impacts employee engagement. So from an Australia perspective, what do you see are some of the drivers that you would think personally that employees values the most?
Yes, thank you. totally agree with what was said before, and particularly, Kimberly mentioned that really resonates as well. I think it is really impossible to say it for a whole country in general. And if we try to look at Australia, I think flexibility is coming up more and more. It is a very big country. People are widely spread, and a lot of Australian companies, or some Australian companies, also have employees just all over the place or internationally as well. So managing flexibility and diverse teams across time zones, that is always something that is important. So with the technological changes now, that really changes how we look at work in Australia. I think that might be one thing that is Australia more specific, but overall it is really up to the organization and the company and the industry as well. I think, depending whether you look at the IT sector or whether that's construction, there is some big disparity there, that it's just impossible to boil it down. In the end of the day, we do all want to have a job that we like, that we enjoy. We want an organization that we can align with. We want to work with people who we respect, and we want to just feel part of a bigger picture, of something bigger than who we are, and that goes across all sectors. What I found quite interesting was in the Gallup study of disengaged or engaged, mainly disengaged employees. Only 13% worldwide are engaged employees. That Australia and New Zealand was ranked one of the highest, with 24% of employees being engaged in the workplace. And again, I mean, that could be that could come from so many different factors. Are we doing something a lot better than other countries? Potentially not. But maybe Australians, and the mentality is just a little bit different. All good. What we always say, people are just maybe a little happier and relaxed, and therefore maybe, just in general a little bit more positive. Whereas, in China, that was the lowest score, and that is the second largest industrial economy. So the industry and the job market looks very different, and it might be harder to really engage people in that space. So I think, the mentality, the industry, and also the overall healthiness of the economy and the country plays a big part in those statistics. So I think the key drivers themselves, I mean, we're all human beings, and we all just want to have, a good life and a good time. The key drivers, I think, are the same. Respect me, give me a good job, let me do whatever I want to do, a little bit of autonomy so that I can really be a part of it, and let me work on some interesting work with great people.
Right. Great.
It's
Well,
wallabies and beer.
Yeah, that's right. Just give us enough.
Yeah.
Isn't that part of it? Isn't that part of it? No. Okay.
It is. So, well, I'm really glad that Linda has pointed out some interesting insights about China. And then I remember I heard fast-growing countries, they normally tend to have a high employee engagement rate. So, in this case, as you all have highly agreed that the role of leaders and executives in an organization is really important to inculcate a culture of engagement in their organization, right? So, what do you recommend for the organization to probably go ahead and create a culture of engagement? We know, it's not a jargon. There are a lot of drivers, depends upon organization to organization, and probably country to country it is different. But still, when we talk about human being, very particularly as Linda has mentioned, or when we talk about people, how do you want to create a culture of engagement? I will start with DP and then kind of let that as an open discussion.
Yeah, that's really the next step, and it's an important one. So, so let me just share with you, and this is, let me put some first statistics on the ground. We have seen within IBM, as when we have gone ahead with Connexa doing a lot of surveys, it shows that wherever you try to, those organizations which measure engagement show a 20-point higher engagement levels than those which do not measure. And we all know that to create anything that we want, right? It's very important for us to measure this. So I think the first piece that we need to understand is that it is important for us, if we want to embed anything, to start measuring that piece, right? Now, having said that, there are few pieces, and all of us have spoken something or the other about this in our first few minutes, is to look at what is it that would help us embed. And there are at least 3 or 4 things I'd like to bring. The first and foremost important part for engagement, and this has shown when we look at the drivers, is the leadership. Now, when we look at leadership, and this leadership is not your immediate manager. I'm not talking about your immediate manager, right? I'm talking about the senior leadership. Now, again, if the senior leadership is shown as somebody who is competent, if the senior leadership shows high integrity, or if the senior leadership shows well-being, of its employees, this has a direct correlation with respect to engagement, and it is a big difference where this does not exist. So when we talk about well-being, then what is it that you're doing for well-being? Do you have something in the organization which says a well-being policy? Do you have steps that you're taking which has got to do with well-being? Does your leader share the vision? And again, the studies show that wherever the vision is shared, and these are the best practices, all organizations with best practices where the vision is shared and vision is taken down and understood by others, there is a higher engagement level. So I think that's another very important driver. And for if we have to create a culture, we need to show the leaders care for people's well-being, the leaders sharing the vision with people. And more than else, I think he has to be honest for his purpose. Now, the next important element is the manager, right? Mm-hmm. And in this case, it's about how he manages his people. And the third piece is, am I providing right teams? Do I have toxic, let me use the word, team members or people playing inside whom I need to possibly either develop or weed out? Because our studies again show that it is the senior leadership, it is the manager, and it is the peers and colleagues, as I think Linda said, that these things matter. So if we want to embed, let's measure, let's see what the leader is doing and leader has to do. Let's look at the people management practices that the managers display, and let us see if the co-workers are positively inclined to the organization. And then there is the last piece is about fairness of reward and recognition, perception of fairness. How do people perceive this, right? It's not about my benchmarking in the global marketplace. It's about, has my performance been recognized and is my recognition fair, right? It's not about recognizing people every now and then. It's about recognizing people when they need to be recognized. So these are some of the things that you do, you end up embedding the culture.
Wonderful. Well, in fact, what you shared is some of the interesting insight about the fairness and the perception. But how do we kind of tweak? Is there any technicality or is there any way to tweak the perception that people normally wanted to have? Because when we talk about recognition, it's always, controversial because, we say that high performers or high posters are always being ranked and getting the attention from executives and organizations very well, but at the same time, an average performer has always been an average performer. So that's kind of an attitude is there in an organization. So what are your takes on how do we tweak this perception, or is there a way to tweak the perception?
Can everybody still hear me? Because
yes.
Am I still there? Am I still on camera?
Yes, Kevin, we can't hear you.
All right, because my browser froze, although it's still on, so that's good news. And I didn't want to restart and disconnect forever from the from the time travel wormhole that we're in right now. So the thing I was going to say, I'll take it from a little bit of a different vantage point and get back to your
Mm-hmm.
question, just because it's
Sure.
something that had been bugging me for a while, and I wrote about it last week, and it was based a little bit based on what we talked about on the Talent Culture Tea Chat show last week with my CEO, Jeff Carr, about
Mm-hmm.
talent engagement and discretionary effort, and the fact that, you know, most of our companies right now are really are focused on developing their employees, developing leadership, and really trying to reinvest in that, and looking for the platforms that are going to help them do that, which, you know, of course, we hope most of that is us, of course. But that, I guess where I'm going with that is that I watched a workplace harassment video recently that is something that a lot of companies, you know, have put their employees through, right? To like listen to, everybody's got to sign off on it. And there was one section about a kind of a decently performing employee that was a pain in the butt, shall we say. And there was this whole scenario that was acted out, portrayed by actors, that was about the how do we deal with this. And one of the things that came out of this scenario was the manager told another employee, or another manager, I think it was, just ignore the person, and eventually they're going to get the message that they need to go away. And of course, you know, the right answer when you take the
Mm-hmm.
quiz at the end of the scenario is don't do that. But unfortunately, and then I did a little bit of digging and a little bit of research, and I found that there was, and I couldn't pull it up because my thing's froze right now, my computer. But anyway, it's just based on the fact that you'd think that workplace bullying was bad enough, right? And across organizations globally, but ignoring staff, ignoring team members, and not dealing with issues and situations is actually more detrimental to engagement than bullying and
Right.
direct outright harassment is. I mean, I wasn't surprised, but
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting to kind of hear that. So when you think about, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about in recognition and the average employees and organizations. I mean, I know that sometimes we get stuck in gridlock and we're driving towards revenue goals, and we need people to help us get there, and those are the hypos, and those are the ones that are performing regularly and are more extroverted depending on the roles and the positions. But we have to stop ignoring people. And if it's somebody that, I mean, that's just kind of, I guess that's my mantra right now. We have to deal with them. So either help them move along
Mm-hmm.
and deal with the situation and get them developed, and maybe there's another role for the person in the organization, maybe there's skills that you need somewhere else, figure that out, or be done with it. But not the ignoring is just, it's, I just know, I just think it's brutal. So I think that's one of those little dark secrets about engagement that we don't talk about a lot, but I think a lot of people have either experienced, participated in, or have heard of. So anyway, that was kind of my little take, is that let's stop ignoring. Let's recognize, even if that means recognizing the fact that you don't belong here anymore, right?
Yeah, it's
Anyway,
brutal. Make your people part of the game, whatever it takes to do that. So even Kevin and DP has pointed out some of the key insights from managers' perspective, and I happened to read this. I think today or yesterday, I don't remember. Harvard Business Review, they did a study tying up with halogen software, and it was the inability of a manager, or they don't have the ability of, or leadership ability, in order to help their employees become successful. So what are uh, um, some of the factors that you missed? Okay, you've been working with clients. So what are some of the factors that you have seen the managers lack when it comes to building that engagement factor among their team?
Um, I think first and foremost is good communication, and it builds on. It's the first thing I thought about when Kevin was talking about ignoring.
Correct.
There is a very common mindset also that when a manager hits a rough spot with an employee, just let HR deal with it, or
Mm.
just ignore it. And managers very often, and perhaps it's the environments I've worked in, but there were not a lot of managers who were basically trained or even had little coaching sessions on how to have difficult conversations. when you manage, all too often people will be thrown into management positions. They're very happy because maybe they have a great salary and a great title. They have accountabilities for their own job and the work that's being done by their team, but they have a whole other full-time job attached to that, and that is their team, the well-being of their team, to keep them motivated, to make sure that any shortcomings they have, that they're trained properly on them. And so many times, I can count on one hand the number of really, really good managers that I have worked with, because managers just think that they can ignore things and they'll go away. And instead of just facing the issue head on, nobody likes to tell somebody, hey, right now we have a problem with the way you're working. No one likes to do that. But if you're a manager, that is part of your job. If you don't want to do it, don't be in the job. And I've actually said that to a manager, because it was, I don't want to tell this person that. Can you tell them for me? No, I can't. This is your job. And it makes it very challenging. And I think that that's a huge detriment, and it undermines, that the ability for employees to ramp up to that next level of satisfaction without good communication. How will employees ever know how they're doing if we don't tell them? Even if it's bad news, we have to tell them. And there are ways to do it without breaking their spirit. There are healthy ways to talk to people, and they don't do it.
Right. So Kevin has pointed out that manager's perspective, and now Kim has elaborated that, and DP has mentioned a little bit about the trust and vision that leaders should have, and how that embedded in an organization. So Linda, you have been helping the organization to improve their performance, communication, and performance management. So how do you think is performance and then direct link that leads to recognition can impact the employee engagement?
Absolutely. It is all about communication, communication, communication. It hits every area of it. If you give regular praise and feedback, you're showing everyone else what is sort of the desired behavior that we are supporting, that we want to get. At the same time, if there is undesired behavior, you do need to do something about it, like Kevin and Kimberly and Deepreet as well said. It is about the ongoing communication and conversation, real-time feedback throughout the year. It's not about that one performance management, performance review form at the end of the year. It is ongoing. If employees know where they're standing at any given point, what the clear goals are that they can work towards, and if managers then stop being managers and start being real leaders to support and nurture and help the team to grow and achieve the goals, then the performance review itself turns more into a check-in, which is just based on what happened in the past. Let's look at how we can improve in the future. And by having that ongoing conversation and always knowing where you're standing, you feel like you're a part of this. You're not a cog in the wheel, but you're really a part of the organization and the bigger picture, and you're more engaged and essentially perform better. It's almost like a family, right? Like this is our goal. And just one more time to bring it back, talking about goals and Germany and the World Cup. If we look at a sports team, for instance, there's a great coach that supports the team, and every individual player. It doesn't matter whether they're substituted earlier or later, we play together, and that is something that we need to see more in organizations as well, to break the silos, create some transparency, have open communication channels, and build that trust to really achieve a goal together.
Well, that's interesting, and I can see a lot of tweets that are coming up on our Twitter stream. And if you have any questions to our guests, tweet your questions with the hashtag IndiaHRLive, and we will be able to pull that up.
Hey, Nisha, can I, just one little quick comment to what Linda was saying, just real briefly, is just because it's something that also is on top of mind. I mean, I think none of us would neglect to admit that whether you're in a for-profit business or a non-profit business, and whatever the ultimate mission and vision of that organization is, we are in the business of driving revenue. Even nonprofits do that, right? So there's nothing wrong to be, abashedly unashamed of the fact that, what everything that we do together is this end goal, because there is some reward, albeit financial only goes so far, and research has shown this, and there's other intrinsic rewards that we want. But that's what fulfills engagement. Monetary compensation alone is not going to keep me somewhere long term. The research shows that it's there. It's all the other intrinsic motivators that drive engagement, of flexibility and loving what we do in our work and being recognized for it. Even if I'm an average employee, and recognition doesn't always have to be positive. Recognition, like we were just talking about, can be something there's something I need to address with you, and I can do it in a way that is appropriate, and it's not positive, but we got to deal with it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's not always about putting gold stars by our name. Sometimes we need that constant reciprocal feedback, and we need to give it back to leadership as well, right? We need to be able to have that conversation. Anyway, I'll be quiet.
Yeah, no, that's totally right. When we talk about recognition, normally when people consider pay or promotion or something that is related to monetary, which is not, but I would totally agree with you when it comes to that recognition part of it. Make it part of the game. Make it make your people feel that they have been valued in your organization and their effort have been noticed and recognized. That's all matter. I really, really appreciate that. And we really wanted to get your takes on, we normally talk about employee value proposition all the time. I mean, HR, that is there in the bucket. But when we talk about leaders, because that's where, that interaction between a manager and a leaders, and that's where this employee value proposition normally comes into play. So DP and Dr. Pallab, and eventually I would like to hear more about why should employees give more stress on delivering on employee value proposition?
Well, so this is something which is, well understood. There's enough and more research which shows that there is a strong correlation between the performance of an organization, the engagement with the clients, if your employees are engaged. So there's enough and more information and data that has been published. But to give you something which is far more nearer home, again, statistically, it has been seen that if the new joiner's experience has been good, he gets more engaged and his tenure is longer. So similarly, there are so much analytics that you can do around the engagement and directly link it to the business outcome that it just ends up becoming a very important proposition which has to be presented to the employee, when he joins the organization. So I think that's a very, very important piece. It has to become a part of everyday vocabulary. It's like any other business decision, like you run any other business. So engagement is as important as that. So that's the way I look at it. I mean, it's a given proposition. You have to take it up. There is no escape from it.
That's true. That's true. Dr. Pallab, we would like to have your takes on what do you see or what do you think employers should do or must do when it comes to promising and delivering on employee value proposition?
Okay, I will take this question from a little a different perspective. The research has also shown what is very important for an organization is to do a segmentation. Because when you talk about employee value proposition, it depends. As Kim was talking at the beginning, I think we have to go to the basics. And HR, I'm sure all over the world is grappling with this. To what extent you think the world is heterogeneous and to what extent you think it's homogeneous? If it is, you take the proposition that world is homogeneous, then our job as an HR people becomes easier because you dish out the same food. But the fact of the life is, as I was sharing, even the data said, millennials have certain thing which is common with all the age groups have. There's more commonality. But then there are something which millennials prefer with other than, for example, as you talk about, because the career, is emerging as the #1 driver for engagement across the globe, across geography, across the segments, age group, everywhere. Now, one need to understand what does career mean, right? For example, I think the millennials, what is more important is self-expression. I'm sure all my fellow panelists would agree that has increased tremendously, right? It's not only about what I do, it's also important how I do it, and more important, how my peer group perceives it I'm doing it. Now, it has three implications. Number one, therefore, I think what is very, very important for the employer is to create a context for what I call it success. Can I create a job? Because that's what I'm thinking is going to happen more and more for the future. Can I create a context where I can engineer, I use the word engineer, the success for a person? Of course, the person has to bring in a lot of things. Success is never, one-way street. So I think employers need to do that through designing work, and that's where I think segmentation comes. What is the kind of job and what is the kind of thing what I will do? I'll give you some of the cultural kind of an experience, India versus in other countries. For example, I know in a ITES job, or which is normally called a business process outsourcing BPO job, I know in India there are organizations who have taken people from a higher age group to do the job, because one of the thing in the voice kind of a job is a lot of monotony. Now, when you are matured at some age, sometime in kind of your career, possibly you have a resilience to accept that monotony. So it's a beautifully matching the kind of people with the job. Let me give you the other example of how do I understand the cultural context, and employers sometimes do not understand this. And let me give an example, and I'm sure DP will be able to kind of understand this. When I was working for large multinational, I have worked mostly with American multinationals, and I have two panelists from USA. And for example, when you structure the benefit in India, for example, and India social system is such, the family means including the parents. And every time I had to create a benefit, I had to give this answer to North American senior HR professionals. Why in India you have to include the parents as a part of medical benefit? It doesn't happen in North America, but it happens in India. And let me try to explain. Anisha, I'm sure you will be able to relate with this. I'm sure DP will. If you're working, you're coming from a tier 3 city in India, and your father is in a hospital, and you are based out of Bangalore or Hyderabad.
Yeah, that's true.
And your father is hospitalized. And when your father gets a medical attention, he survives possibly a heart attack and goes to the best hospital available in that tier 3 town where parents live. The next day when he kind of survives, everybody comes and asks, what happened? How did you get this? And he talks about the treatment. And he also proudly says, it's my son's company, whatever it is. It may be IBM, or it may be Google, or it may be anybody. Citrix has enabled this. Can you imagine that, in terms of the engagement you create? Because here, the engagement is not only what you are doing to him, you are also doing to his family. And in Indian cultural context, the decision to join an organization or leave an organization, inputs come from your family. So understanding the job for which you are getting people, because in India, the other side of the story, I have given you the two story, but let me give you all, so the other stories and for my friends from North America and Australia. India produces, I always give these statistics, I love to give these statistics, 900,000 engineers and 500,000 MBAs every year. So what we do, we recruit overqualified people. No matter what you do in terms of your communication as an employer, no matter what you benefits you offer, if you cannot create a job in which the person can utilize his or her capabilities and show success, I can tell you that engagement will go down.
Well, Dr. Palab, I wanted to stop you right there because we are running out of time, and that is such an interesting insight that you have shared, and that's where the difference comes from. The India continent and then America or the Australia. So policies and procedures does contribute to engagement. Is that so? What are your takes, Kevin or Kim or Linda, if you can share? Do you think that these policies and procedures have a direct impact on how and why employees feel or contribute to their work?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'll let the HR practitioner Kimberly speak more to that, but I mean, it absolutely impacts, and the more restrictive, the worse it gets. So
I am an anti-policy HR person. I think the more policies a company has, the worse the culture is, because I believe firmly that we do have mandated regulations we have to follow. We don't want to discriminate, and that's a given. But when you get into nitpicking, when you deprive someone of going to a funeral to a distant relative because they only get so much time off, that's just a quick and dirty example. It's micromanaging to the nth degree. And if you have to read through an employee handbook and shake your head and say, this is absolutely crazy, unfortunately, you're already working there by the time you get the handbook. Not a lot of candidates ask to see the employee manual prior to accepting a job offer. They want to see their benefits and their compensation, but they don't want to see all the regulations. And what I found is that when leaders do not want to address the issue head on, the difficult conversations, they create a policy. Let's just punish the whole instead of addressing the few. When the whole class stays in for recess because of the actions of one person, it's dodging the bullet of that gray area, which goes back to poor leadership, in my opinion, which can come from poor communication. So I am not and it's almost contradictory. If you have the HR person responsible for all the compliance and the regulations and making sure all the laws are not being broken, but then you have the HR professional trying to continue the engagement and the communication and the good relationships, it's almost contradictory. I wouldn't mind if they were separate roles, because what's the perception then from managers and employees of this HR person? You're the one, you want us to talk to each other, you want us to be transparent, you want us to have our difficult conversations, yet you're on us about the policies in the handbook. It just seems like a different role there, a little bit contradictory in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, folks, it's been an interesting conversation, and we are running out of time, and we need to wrap up at this point. But one very quick question to all of our guests, and that's in my notes. How are successful employees nailing employee engagement? And I know during the pre-show we talked a little. I talked to DP a little bit about the sentiment analysis that he wants us to bring in during the show. So DP, what are your takes on how are successful organizations nailing employee engagement?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Nisha. And I just want to respond to Dr. Kim, and she raised a very important subject, and which has got to do with policies. Yeah, I think policies are a good guidance. When you have a very large organization into multiple thousands of employees, let's say if you provide them a guidance of how we're going to look at the well-being, and you say well-being becomes an important piece, and we do that, so it's very enabling. So I agree, it's a double-edged sword, but I think it's important. Well, coming back to sentiment analysis, I think we are all into the era of this social world and use of social platforms in the organizations, and what we are, all of us are getting onto it if we have not got onto it within our enterprise platforms. So we found that it is extremely helpful to do what is called a sentiment analysis and see what is it that the people are thinking, and then what is it that we need as an intervention to be done. And I'm of the view that the vocabulary that is spoken in the organization, if we understand that, that gives us great cues to what kind of steps we need to take and what is it that talk that's happening. So to me, one of the very important pieces, in addition to the whole piece of measuring and then doing the entire analytics around the measurements that you've got, and doing sentiment analysis really helps us embed employee engagement in an organization.
Wonderful. So, Linda, what's your take on what have you seen, or some of the interesting insights that organizations are doing in order to nail employee engagement?
Yeah, definitely communication, transparency, building up trust, that really employees can do their job well without being over managed, and that comes back to the policies. Completely agree with Kimberly. Rather than having everything worked out for an exception, why don't we just have guidelines that we know this is the path that we want to go down, and not try and capture all of the bad parts and exclude everything, but just be open. Autonomy, I think, is something that maybe came a little bit short now. I think that whole piece of individual leadership is important, that we're sort of all the CEO of the moment and have some responsibility, which comes back, if we feel a part of the organization that we respect and we work for a shared goal, then we will try to do the best that we can to support this structure. So that individual leadership is really important in that, and autonomy in terms of driving engagement and not being micromanaged and people tell us what to do exactly, but that we have some autonomy within our job role, which comes back to the whole trust thing. If we're trusted in an organization, then we're there to help.
Right. Kevin, would you like to take next?
Yeah, that simple. Don't ignore, deal.
Yeah, I like that.
That's
simple
it.
and short. And Kim, what do you say?
I go back to the communication, heavy duty communication. It's so underutilized.
Wonderful. And Dr. Pillai,
Yeah,
what do
as I
you say? Yeah, what are your insights to those organizations to nail employee engagement?
as I said, that we need to understand, if you have a multi-generational workforce, we need to understand this very well. It's the era of analytics, and especially for large organization, you can analyze and figure out what is the need of a particular segment. Any way you can slice and dice, maybe on age, maybe on responsibilities, maybe on role. And HR especially has to realize one thing, that there is not one solution for every segment. But of course, if you are a more homogeneous organization, your job becomes very easy. If you have a smaller workforce, very focused, coming from a particular domain, age group, you know it. But what I see many time organizations miss is they kind of use the same solution for everybody. And my 2 cents for the global organizations, having worked for large American multinationals, I think they have to understand the world is becoming a global village. It's as much important to understand the cultural tenets of that particular place before, I can understand large organization will always have policies and processes, but how do I make it relevant for the local culture, the people over there? That will make a lot of difference.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you to each and every guest. And it's been a fantastic conversation. I know it's been an insightful conversation, and we can see a lot of tweets on Twitter. And hope you all enjoy the show. I know 60 minutes is not enough to discuss this kind of interesting topic. And again, thank you to everyone for joining here with us on the show. And DB, Dr. Pallab, Kevin, Kim, and Linda, pleasure to have you on the show. Look forward to having you again sometime soon.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Anisha. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye,
Bye.
folks.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful. And so, folks, we will talk to you all in our next show. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel of IndiaHRLive.com. Thanks. Bye-bye.